Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back. Before we get into the episode, just want to let you know that this is the free version of the podcast, and all that means is that we are way behind where I'm at in Patreon. So if you are loving this podcast and you need more John Constantine in your life, definitely go check us out at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books and sign up for the Hellblazer tier, where you'll get access to the entire Hellblazer library that I've recorded so far. And also you'll get access to the exclusive episodes of the Planes, Trains, and Comic Books main podcast. So if any of that sounds good to you, definitely go over to patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, and sign up there. And with that out of the way, let's get into the issue. Today we're reading Hellblazer number 29, and just a little catch up on what's been going on in this story arc. John Constantine is on the trail of a serial killer named the Family Man, but what he doesn't know is that serial killer is on his trail as well. So as John has thought he's like one step ahead, it turns out that the Family Man has already made some moves on John's family. And as of last issue, John was unaware of the moves that the Family Man had made against him. So he's just kind of trying to formulate a plan. And we ended the last issue with him talking about violence is going to be needed. And he got a bread knife and he was like, I'm going to stab this guy with a bread knife. So that is where we left off, with him in his apartment and a bread knife. And first things first, we got the cover here. We see there is a gun, a 6-shooter revolver to be precise. And there's a man behind that gun whose face is looking out, but his face is also hidden by many different types of masks. And we see this issue is written by Jamie Delano with art by Ron Tyner and Kevin Walker. And on the first page, we start off with a nightmare that John is having. In his nightmare, he's walking towards the Family Man who is sitting down. And then John is walking up to him and he's saying, "You think I can't do it? You're wrong. You're old, easy meat." And then we see a POV shot of John stabbing out with the bread knife that he had in the last issue. And at first, he just cuts the man's arm, but then he eventually is able to cut off the arm. And then he does get a stab in the gut on the Family Man. But as he does that, the Family Man begins to morph and becomes John's father. And part of the last issue was actually showing the Family Man killing John's father. So John is having like a premonition dream where it's like him killing his father. And he's saying, "No, don't change. I didn't mean to hurt you. Don't hate me, please," as his father pulls the knife out of his stomach. And then John wakes up screaming, "Dad!" And he's like lunging forward with the bread knife. So now that he's awake, he's trying to calm down. He lights a cigarette, and as he does, he starts hearing noises outside the apartment door where he's staying. And we also see that the apartment he's staying in is the apartment above Chaz's workplace, his buddy Chaz. So upon hearing this noise, John is like, "Oh man, that's the Family Guy." So he gets his bread knife and he quietly walks downstairs in socks, and then he surprises the man who's in the house, and it turns out it is Chaz, in fact. And there's a bit of a scuffle where each of them don't realize that the other one is the other person. So Chaz is pretty much beats the shit out of Constantine. And John's like, "Chaz, no, it's me. And Chaz is like, "Christ, John, if that was meant to be a joke, it weren't funny." Because from his point of view, he just got attacked by someone with a knife. So they kind of make up after that, and they begin to talk about, what's going on. And Chaz is telling John that his wife isn't very happy that John is hanging around Chaz. She thinks he's a bad influence on him. And even Chaz is like, "Look, I don't want any part of your like black magic stuff." But John is assuring Chaz that it is not black magic this time. It's not demons and supernatural stuff. It's actually a human that he's trying to fight. And then Chaz kind of laughs at him because he's like, "You don't know how to fight." And so John is like, "Yeah, I know. So I'm thinking maybe you can get me a gun." So he asks Chaz straight up if he can get John in touch with someone who can get him a gun. And Chaz says, "Yeah, he can, but it's going to be expensive, obviously." And John says, "Don't worry. William Hill's took me bet, suckers." So William Hill is a local bookie that, takes bets on horse races. And we've already established that John uses his magics to find out which horses are going to win races and then bets on them. And so he's basically been banned from every bookie because he wins too much and there's something fishy about it. Then we cut to later that day where the Family Man has gotten some information, I believe it was from Constantine's dad, that John might be around the betting parlor at William Hill. So he's scouting the area. He's kind of waiting and making sure there's no people in there. And then he goes in there once it's empty, and he starts talking to the person at the window. And that guy says, "Yeah, I know him. Seems he's barred from all the local bookies around here. Wins too much, you know what I mean? Nobody told me, though, the bastard. He took me for $2,000 yesterday." And then the family man asks, "But you know where he lives?" And the guy behind the glass is like, No, I don't." And with that, the family man leaves and goes to another betting parlor. And he asks the same questions to these guys, except this time the person gives him some more information, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that guy's name is Constantine. I don't know where he stays, but I saw him coming out of Eddie Morgan's place the other day." And Eddie Morgan's is the name of the place where Chaz works. So now the family man doesn't really know it, but he is actually on to where Chaz works and also where John lives, because John lives in the apartment above where Chaz works. So the family man goes over to Eddie Morgan's, and who does he see there but Chaz? And he begins to ask Chaz about John, and he's showing a picture of John from the newspaper. So it seems like John's plot actually worked when he purposefully got his picture taken and put in the newspaper so the family man would see it and then want to try to track him down. So when the family man asks Chaz, "Do you know this man?" Chaz kind of pauses, and then he turns around and says, "Never seen him in my life." And as he turns around, the family man knows he's lying, and the family man grabs Chaz's ears and then shoves his face into the wall, and it looks like he breaks his nose. Then we cut to, at the same time, I guess, John is at the park waiting for the man who's supposed to bring him his gun. So that guy finally shows up and then tells John to go into a restroom with him, and he proceeds to sell John the gun and the bullets. Of course, the gun is $500, but the bullets are another $100. So obviously you want bullets with your gun. And after John purchases them, he actually asks the guy if he will load it for John, because John doesn't know anything about guns at all. All he knows is that they are deadly and not to be messed with. And usually he won't use them at all, and it's not his thing, but this is serious. He doesn't think he'll be able to take on the family man with just his own physical abilities. So the seller actually loads the gun and then gives it back to John and leaves. And then John is in the bathroom kind of practicing with the gun. He's never, I guess, fired one before. So he's practicing and looking at himself in the mirror, kind of like in Taxi Driver, where he's like, "You looking at me?" That kind of thing. He's not saying those words, but he's just kind of getting the feel of it. He says, "It's heavy, dead weight of ugly engineering, murder's cold handshake." And then he points the gun at the mirror and pulls the trigger, actually, and fires it inside the bathroom. And I guess that's all the practice he's going to get because, like he said, he doesn't know how to load the gun, and I don't think he bought many bullets. And he only had 6 to start with, and now he's got 5. So John heads back to Eddie Morgan's, Chaz's workplace. And when he gets there, it's weird because the door is locked, and that's not usual. So he knocks, and he's like, "Chaz, are you there? Hurry up, mate, I'm freezing." And then as Chaz opens the door, he sees the damage that the family man did. Chaz is all bandaged up. He's got a bandage around his head. It looks like he's got a splint on his nose, and his collar is all bloody on his white undershirt. And Chaz says, "You could have warned me, you bastard." And while they're talking, we can also see that across the street, the family man has decided to wait in a barber and is looking out the window. And he sees John returning, and this is what he's been waiting for. He has not yet gotten an actual visual of Constantine since he first met him in issue 24. Then we cut back to John, who was talking to Chaz inside of the building, and Chaz is telling him what happened. He says, "He showed me your picture in the paper. I told him to piss off. So he smashed me face in and tore off half me bloody ear. He was really fast, John, and strong as a bastard horse. I can't believe a bloody pensioner could do this to me. You should have told me he was old." And then Chaz reaches in his pocket as John is telling him that, Chaz should forget this and go home. And out of his pocket, Chaz pulls one of the postcards that John has sent his dad, and he hands it to John, and he says, "He told me to give you this. News from home," he said. And instantly John knows it's his dad. He yells out, "Dad," and he immediately runs over to the phone and calls his sister Cheryl. And he says, "Hello, Cheryl? It's me, John." "Oh, it's true then. What? Yeah, Christ. Listen, I've got to go, kid. I'll be in touch." And then John hangs up the phone and he begins to break down. He starts kind of sniffling, and then he like hides his face as he collapses and puts his head into his knees and begins to cry on the ground. And Chaz kind of walks over and he says, "John?" And John says, "He's killed him. Chaz, the bastard's done my dad. I should have thought. He always goes after families. If he gets me, he'll kill Cheryl and the kid. I've got to get ahead of him." So now that John has finally realized that the family man is a step ahead of him, essentially, he's realizing, okay, if I leave this place, obviously the family man might actually be watching me right now, so I need to come up with a plan. So John asks Chaz if Chaz's cousin, Norma, is still on the game, which I guess means that she's a prostitute, because he thinks he'll need a woman. So it seems that John and Chaz have come up with a plan. Now knowing that the family man is probably watching them, John and Chaz begin to do like an act out of them having an argument and Chaz kicking John out. So as Chaz kind of pushes John out the door, John says, "Come on, Chaz, it's 11 o'clock at night. Just let me stay till morning. You said you'd help." And then Chaz responds, "It's too risky, John. You're not keeping it together. I've changed my mind. You're on your own, pal." And then as the door slams and John walks away, he yells, "Bastard!" And then John lights a cigarette and begins to walk down the street. And the reason we know this is like a plan is because the next panel we see is Chaz looking out the blinds of his windows, and he's specifically looking to see if John is now being followed, which he is. So the family man continues to follow John down these alleyways and the streets until John gets to an apartment. And when he knocks on the door, it is answered by a woman, and that is Chaz's cousin named Norma. And as John enters, she says, "Sorry to hear about your dad. Chaz said you could do with some company. I'll have to charge you, though. I can't afford charity at my time of life. 100 quid the night, all right?" And John agrees, that's fine. And he begins to walk around the room, and she offers him a drink, and he's like, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll take a scotch." And then he asks if he can open a window, and this is part of his strategy. He knows the family man is going to be following him, and he's hoping that the family man will listen in the window and hear the conversation. And this will allow John to feed the family man bad information and hopefully allowing John to get a leg up on this guy. So as he's talking to Norma, he begins to say the information kind of loud, and he's making sure his head is turned towards the window and allow him to be easily heard, because he's telling where he's going to be tomorrow. He says, "I'm leaving tomorrow at 7 o'clock, the bus to Liverpool." And as he's talking, Norma begins to undress, and she says, "Oh, aren't you going to take your coat off while you wait?" And all Norma has on is like a negligee with a bathrobe on. So she takes that off and sits on the bed, and now she's just sitting there in her underwear, and she begins to undress John, and she's saying, "Hey, you're trembling. Come on, relax. You'll soon feel better." And as she begins to massage John's neck, he just turns around and asks, "Is this clock right?" He like picks up her alarm clock. And she's like, "Yeah, don't worry about the time. We've got all night." And he's like, "Yeah, but I don't want to miss my bus." So Norma takes the clock out of his hands and says, "There, I've set it for 6. Now just lie back." But instead of doing that, John kind of sits up more and he shrugs off her arms and he says, "Look, Norma, it's not your fault. I don't think I'm up to the full business right now. I just need someone to sleep with. You can keep the money." And then she responds, "Don't worry, it's nice to have the night off. You just snuggle up cozy and have a nap." And as they're saying those last things, we see that outside the window, the family man has in fact been listening, and he's got a smile on his face because now he knows, or he thinks he knows, that John is going to be asleep until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And you can just tell by the way he's smiling in the art that the wheels are turning in his head. He's definitely coming up with a plan to kill John tonight. And as he's thinking, someone sees him standing outside of Nora's window, and he yells out, "Here, look at him, a peeper, dirty old man." And extremely alarmed by this, the family man runs past the guy and walks away really quickly because he's just trying to get out of the area. And as he's walking, we see him walk by a telephone booth, and someone comes out that's smoking. We don't know who they are yet, but they begin to follow the family man all the way back to the family man's hotel where he's staying. So when the family man goes into his hotel, he talks to the front desk and says, "Please be certain to wake me up at 5 o'clock. Good night." And he walks up the stairs to his room, and then we cut to the outside of the building, and we see that mysterious person standing just outside of the light of the door. So it seems like he probably heard what the family man just said. Then we cut back to John and Nora, who are fast asleep, and John is sleeping with the gun in his hand, finger on the trigger, which I wouldn't recommend if you have a firearm. And all of a sudden, the phone begins to ring, and it scares the crap out of John, and he wakes up with the gun in his hand. So he puts that down, and he answers the phone, and we find out the person on the phone is Chaz, and Chaz was the person who followed the family man back to his hotel. So we can hear John's side of this conversation. So when he answers the phone, he's like, hello, Chaz? Yeah. Which hotel? Right. 5 o'clock, you sure? No, that's great. You've done brilliant. I owe you. No, that's all. I know, mate. We can handle it. I'm sure. So once he's done talking to Chaz, I guess he's in a better mood because he looks over at Nora and he sees that she's laying face down and she's in her lingerie and she's looking pretty good. So he kind of pushes on her and he says, Nora, are you awake? And of course, because John was being all loud with his conversation and the phone rang out of nowhere, she is awake and she's like, what did you expect? Why? And he's like, I think I've changed my mind, as he's like staring at her and she's like, thought it was too good to be true. Come on then. And they move in close together, and then that's the end of the issue. So if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, at gmail.com. And we will see you on the next one.